first off, I just want to thank everybody for coming. And also, can we get a huge round of applause for Brian?
I didn't do much, I just watched y'all work.
So, my name is Eric. I'm co-founder and CEO of Swerve, and very grateful for you all to be here and to celebrate Bishoy and his story. And just before we kick it off and get into it, I wanted to share a little bit of background on how I met Bishoy. So, I've actually known him for quite some time now. We met, we grew up in the same town, and yeah, went to, actually, he talks about a high school party in his book, and I was at that party. No, you don't want to hear that. And then when we opened up Swerve, Bishoy was one of the first to come here and support us and tell his friends and rally the troops. And Bishoy has truly been a giver. And with whatever it is that Swerve is going through, he's always curious to ask how, or just always lending a helping hand and saying, Eric, what can I do for you? How can I help? Connecting me with people. And so just speaks volumes to who he is and how he ended up here today and being the star of the show. So to kick this off, Bishoy, I mean, we're obviously going to get into how you ended up writing this book, but you have a really powerful story. So why don't you just give us a quick, I know it's not going to be very quick, but a rundown on you and your backstory.
So let me just turn it to Eric really quick. One thing, actually two things I remember about Eric. He had the smoothest jump shot for a 12-year-old. So I met him in middle school, and I'll never forget trying out for that basketball team and just watching him on the court and just remembering how smooth he was on that court. And that was one aspect of it. The other aspect of Eric that I remember is just in talking to him at such a young age, we didn't even go to high school together, I just knew that whatever Eric did, he was going to be successful at it. And so when Swerve opened up, and they were, just getting started and looking to meet with investors and trying to build from the ground up, I introduced Eric to a couple of people, and a couple of these people would ask me, well, have you seen, any of their numbers? And I'm like, well, not really. And I'm like, they're like, all right, well, why do you expect us to, invest in Swerve? And I just turned to all of them and said the same exact thing, and I just said, you're going to want to put your money on Eric. And that's exactly how it went down before every single meeting. And so I feel very fortunate to be here and to have the story kind of come full circle. I just published Break Barriers back in September. I wrote the book with the objective of helping readers channel the mindset to overcome different obstacles, whether they're personal, professional, on the playing field. I also wrote it with a mission that no matter who you are, no matter what you're going through, whether you've never taken a spin class, never run a race, whether you're an intern or an executive, there's something in this book that I hope that you can hold on to and kind of take away from. And that was kind of my main mission with writing the book. The book is based on my personal story, and just a quick synopsis. I was born in Egypt. When I was 3 years old, I was diagnosed with leukemia. My parents immigrated for me to get treatment. And I talk about the mindset I developed between the ages of 3 and 13 and how that helped me navigate my adult life, whether it was in my career, whether it was on the playing field. Ultimately, from an athletic perspective, a lot of it started right here in the studio. In fact, there's a whole chapter called Swerve because I had to get my footing as an adult who never established himself athletically. And I would come to this studio and over the course of time build up my confidence and build a community of people who kind of started to show me that I could do more than I thought I could. Ultimately, that led up to me signing up for my very first race. Now, several races, let's call it 20, 30 races later, 3 marathons and a half Ironman, I decided to finally share this story because it was one of those moments of realization where if I can do this, any one of you can do this. And the truth of the matter is, and I'm not going to take away from all the questions to come, last December, I Googled how to write a book. And here we are now.
So that's a great starting point. Thank you for the very kind words. But when you Googled it, what did it say?
A lot of stuff I didn't understand. And so I was at another job at the time, and I had made the conscious decision after being with the same firm for 7 years that I was looking for a change from a career prospects. And I knew my job pretty well to the point where I didn't have to put much thought in my day-to-day. So I Googled how to write a book, number one, but then I also Googled how many words you need to write to hit 100 pages. Just because I thought that was a respectable amount of pages. And so it was 20,000 words. And my boss was in Houston at the time, and I don't think there's any representatives here. And so I started bringing my laptop to work. And I would take these long lunch breaks, and in 3 months, I hit the 100 pages. And it was a long Word document. And that's actually when I reached out to Eric in Midtown. And I knew Eric, over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, had to have built a pretty good network. And I just said to him, I'm like, listen, I have a really long Word document. You've got to know somebody that's published a book. And so he did. And so he connected me with his friend who looked at it. And he said, I think you have something. Do you mind if I give you my editor? And I was like, yeah. So then he gave me his editor. And I had no idea how much it cost to write a book. I had no idea what went into it. I thought my 100 pages was pretty much a book. The way that I structured it was, my favorite number is number 8. So I picked 8 inspirational quotes, and I just started writing under each of those quotes. And then I just put it all together. Where the editor came in and where he helped me is, he helped me realize that I could have 100 pages of great ideas, but if I don't give the reader a reason to flip from the first page to the last page, it doesn't matter what's in there. And that's essentially how the process evolved.
So you make that sound very easy. So let's actually dive deeper into this process. Before we do that though, does anybody here want to write a book? Can you raise your hand if you? Awesome, great. Like now or in the future? Future, okay, awesome. So you talk about when you first had the idea to go ahead and write the book, and then how long did it take from when you had the idea to actually sitting down and writing?
I'm not the norm, so it happened very quick. So I've always toyed around with the idea of writing a book, but I never felt like I had the right to share the story. Like I didn't think it was anything anyone would want to read. And so it was a culmination of things. In 2017, I ran the New York City Marathon, and it was the very first time I wrote this story on just one piece of paper because I had to raise money for charity in order to run the race. And in 2017, when I shared that piece of paper, lo and behold, my story ended up taking off, and I raised over $50,000 for charity by sharing it. And so I knew there was power to be found in the story, but I didn't know if it was still a book. And then over the course of the next 2 years, I was humbled because I didn't know what to do with it. I was getting opportunities to speak at different places, whether it was companies or universities, and translating the success of fundraising to succeeding in a sales organization. Different topics were thrown my way, and I didn't know how to piece it together. And it really was ultimately when I had sat down and looked myself in the mirror and said it was time for a change career-wise, where I was able to kind of check out a little bit from my day-to-day and really devote the time. So it really was a span of a couple of weeks where I said, I'm going to do this, I Googled it, and I got to work.
So you touch upon a lot there. Did you get external validation? Like, were you talking to people about this, and then somebody's like, oh, that's a good idea, or oh, you accomplished this? Like, that's interesting. What was it that got you over that hump to saying, this is actually a book, it's not just a story?
Yeah. It was a 2 or 3 year build-up from seriously starting out here in a studio like this, realizing that I can do more than I set out for, finally making it happen, then writing it down on a piece of paper. And when I wrote it down on a piece of paper for the very first time, I almost didn't share it myself. I actually showed it to a mentor because I was vulnerable. I said, this is my life on paper, and if people don't like this, like, well, there it goes. So, so I showed it to a mentor, and he looked at it, and he laughed, and he goes, you need to make your goal higher, because my goal was just $3,000 for that race. And he gave me another vote of confidence. And then after that, it started to make its way through the press and get publicity. And then it was just kind of like, what am I actually passionate about? And this was ultimately what I felt passionate about. If I were to lose my job tomorrow, this is ultimately what I would feel good about in terms of accomplishments.
So you mentioned being vulnerable, sharing that. Did you hit bumps in the road where you started to doubt yourself? Because I think that's something that we all experience as humans. So if that happened, how did you get through that self-doubt?
There were a lot of hurdles along the way. Because I I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I didn't know how much a book costs to make. And honestly, a book can cost anywhere from a couple $1,000s to $100,000, depending on who you are and what you're willing to pay for in terms of writing a book. So that was, of course, one hurdle. Then there was the vulnerability aspect times 10. It's one thing if you share it for a fundraising link. It's another thing if you put a year into writing it, publish it, put it out there, and then no one buys it or no one cares about it. That's like another level of vulnerability. And then there was the actual writing aspect of it. I had no literary background. I didn't feel like I was more qualified than anyone in this room to be writing a book. And a part of the process was, and if any of you guys are considering writing a book, like you raised your hand, the editor was essentially my 9-month therapist. Like, we would go back and forth and spend hours on the phone into the wee hours of the night, basically working through every single word, every single page, and I learned a lot about the fact that editors aren't just spell checkers and grammatical errors. In fact, there's probably a bunch in here still that haven't been corrected. But what they are is they are enforcers. They push you to bring out the best work. And my editor was awesome and helping me do that.
Great. So what you have in there, to me, I heard your voice. Do you feel like when you work with the editor, did they tweak it in ways that you said, no, that's not me, or like how did it end up there, and what is that you?
Yeah, so there was a lot of that. So one of the other things that you would think is obvious when writing a book, but in the first several drafts didn't come to light, was you need to bring the reader in the room with you, especially when you're writing about something that's meant to be connecting and motivational and have a level of empathy within it in terms of drawing you in. So there were certain scenes in the book where I had to literally rewrite the depiction of like the colors on the wall and the lighting and do what I can to bring the reader inside the room to make them feel like they're in that journey with you. And that was hard. In fact, one of the things that he made me do at one point was, this was after I thought I wrote the book. He told me, go back and think about the 40 most critical moments of your life and write 1,000 words for each of those moments. So I thought I wrote the book at 20,000 words. He made me write another 40,000 words. And I had to think of 40 critical moments within my life. And by moment number 25, I was kind of running out, and I was really stretching it in terms of, critical life moments. But he challenged me, and that was super, super important throughout the process.
Awesome. Were there moments when you got stuck, and how did you unstuck yourself?
There were definitely moments where I got stuck, especially where I was, where I felt like I was stretching for material. So then I'd have to kind of put the book away. And I like to run, so I like to do a lot of my thinking when I'm running. Anytime I'm in any sort of fuss or can't make my mind up about something, I tend to do that. And usually the mind starts flowing after I do that. Another thing was, I leaned on my family at times to kind of help me reminisce about certain moments and the stuff, especially in my younger years, or maybe I didn't, recall as much and kind of had to draw points for that. So there were definitely moments like that.
Awesome. I have a lot more questions, but I feel like it could be helpful to let people chime in. So does anybody want to jump in and ask a question?
What's the difference between a story and a book?
Good question.
Story and book. The first thing that comes to mind is, when I think of a book, I think of, I don't have a reason to go from front to end, right? Like, a story is compelling enough to make you want to read every single word and every single page. A book is just text, in my opinion. I think of like a textbook. It's a book, but I have no reason to kind of go through every single page of that book.
The book you wrote has a beginning and end. However, your life is not over. Are you going to write another book after that from the continuation point? Is it like you get a tattoo, someone wants to immediately get another one?
That's the number one question that I get. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't write another book. Like, I do agree with you. I don't think the story is necessarily over, and I mentioned that really quick at the end of this book. I think I'm still learning a lot about this book, even though it's out there. You know, to the day that I released it, published it, I had no idea what was going to happen with it. I had no idea if it was going to be bought. I had no idea if it was going to be received. I had no idea anything. You know, I didn't know if I was going to recoup any of the work or the time that I put into it. So a part of it is still kind of finishing off the last unwritten chapter of this book.
If you had to pick one major takeaway for your readers to walk away with, what would it be?
The major takeaway that I want readers to take away from this book is that barriers and obstacles are never put in front of you to define you, but rather to dare you. That's the main takeaway from this book, and the one theme that I think escalates throughout the book is that one after the other, an obstacle kind of came my way, and I feel like that's what could be related to other folks. And the way that I started to or the moment that I realized that this was a story worth telling was when I overcame that final obstacle that I talk about in the book, and I said, all right, enough is enough. You've been holding on to this too long. It's time to put it out there. Barriers are not meant to define you, but always to dare you to do greater.
So you mentioned writing a book at work. Did your coworkers, if you still work there, did your coworkers catch wind of the fact that you're writing it? Like, yes. And once they realized you wrote the book, were you forthright about it when you were writing it, and what was your reaction?
So I don't work there anymore. But there's a lot of good stories around that. I don't work there anymore, but I do feel the universe is a funny way of kind of working itself out. As I was writing the book, I was obviously applying for other jobs, but I made the conscious decision. I got a call to interview at my current job, and in spite of having 7 years of experience at this firm, and I had extensive experience, and I was doing some pretty legit things, they looked at my resume and they said, hey, we see you're writing a book. Tell us more about this book. And so that's kind of how things worked out, and that was my affirmation essentially, around like, all right, someone's looking out for me somewhere. Did I get caught while writing the book by colleagues? Yeah, I did get caught in the cafeteria a few times, but I don't think even myself, I knew that it was going to come to fruition. It was just me and my laptop in the cafeteria typing away on a Word document, and at that point I had no idea what was going to come of it.
If you could do it again, what would you do differently?
If I could do it again, what would I do differently? The honest answer is not much. And not because I think I did it perfectly, but I think that the way that it was done was truly humbling every step of the way, where I don't want to make it easier for myself. I kind of appreciate the fact that I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I didn't know what I was doing throughout. I still, quite frankly, don't know what I'm doing now. And so I have a big appreciation for that, because I think that when things happen organically, as they have been so far, the ride is a lot more fun.
Did the package, the title and subtitle of the jacket, did you have that in your head the whole time, or did it come to you later? What was that process like for you?
So the title, Break Barriers, this was a mantra that I had developed when I got a clean bill of health at a young age. I had mentally decided to myself that anything you had put in front of me, I was going to figure out a way to overcome. And all throughout my life, any job interview I went on, I remember kind of pointing to it, and they'd be like, well, how do you think you're going to accomplish this task? And I'd be like, listen, when I was a young kid, I kind of set forth that anything you put in front of me, I'm going to figure out a way to figure out. So Break Barriers was always something that I had in mind. The cover is interesting because after we wrote the book, I didn't know the process, even the back cover. I didn't know much about how that was done. And the editor asked me, he's like, so what are you doing for the cover? And I was like, I don't know. So we looked at a bunch of books in the similar genre, and my mind is escaping me, but the David Goggins book, Can't Hurt Me, was one of the books that we looked at. And then we looked at one of the books by Tiger Woods and a couple other books in a similar theme. And I remember looking at the Tiger Woods book with the Nike logo on it. And Eric and I share a friend who owns Woolico, one of the founders of Woolico here. And so I called him up and I said, hey, this is kind of an awkward question. I go, well, what do you think about me wearing your brand on my cover? And I don't know, maybe if people buy my book, they'll buy your stuff. Maybe if they buy your stuff, they'll buy my book. I was like, I'm not Tiger, but maybe one day. And so I was really fortunate that he jumped on it right away and said, absolutely, go for it. And so that was just another organic piece of the pie. And I'm just grateful for that.
Tiger, like which era?
Clear that up. Like winning the Masters.
Okay. How did you get to this mean mug on this cover?
Yeah.
And like, so was this a marketing thing that you learned? Like, don't smile?
Yeah. So we found out smiles don't sell. So, and I'm not saying that I was prepared to make this face. There was about 1,000 pictures out there that I had friends and family sort through, and they all were sick of my face by by scrolling through a couple pages. And so we landed on this one, but honestly, to me, they all look the same. And I again just found a local photographer. Oh, one of the cool things that I learned about was, again, I had no idea what I was doing in terms of photography. If anyone here is a photographer, these photos are licensed generally. And so I didn't know anything about licensing. I didn't know anyone was going to technically own the rights to my picture. And so at one point, like, that involved like getting some advice from a friend who had to advise me on who to buy from, what the contract looked like, and I had to learn that aspect of it.
Awesome. You've done a really great job marketing this and putting yourself out there and locking in sponsors. So talk to us about that process and how you've been able to find these sponsors and get them behind you. And
yeah, so I've been really fortunate, and again, I have to bring a lot back to Swerve in the sense that
I didn't pay them, by the way.
That they helped me build my community. Like, I met the founders of Olago through Swerve. I met a lot of the other companies that I partnered up with through this community, to the point where it wasn't really a professional email or a professional ask. It was more of like a, hey, we work out together, like, can you help me out with this? Like, and generally, you know, the things that they were helping out with was to help enhance the broader community. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to kind of continue to build the community through publishing this book. But that being said, once I published it, released it, and started to see copies come out, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if am I an author. I still like kind of, that doesn't come out naturally when I say it. And so that's when I looked into hiring a PR firm. And Ali and Sarah, if you're here, these are my publicists. So now they do a very good job of helping set up this event and coordinate this event, and they're helping me now reach out to other companies to continue to build the brand. But that was a scary leap in and of itself, to kind of say, hey, like, not only did I invest in writing this book, but now I'm going to invest in like the growth and the market of this book.
You said something there that really resonated, and something that when I talked to a lot of people about, you called yourself an author, right? So like, at what point did you actually say, oh, I'm an author? Was it when you actually had the book, or when you were writing the book? Because there are a lot of people who are photographers or entrepreneurs and whatnot who don't take on that title or share it. They take too long to share it, and that actually prevents them from getting the word out and getting work and really sharing like their value to the world. So at what point did you start calling yourself an author?
I mean, to be honest, it still doesn't come out fluently. When I say it, it doesn't sound natural. In a professional setting, when I know that I need to say it, when we're engaging with other companies and setting up events, like I could probably say it a little bit more confidently. But you know, if I'm out, you know, talking to someone, I can't. I still can't say it out loud and not kind of.
You should.
Yeah, I know, but it's tough. It's tough to kind of say it and not, you know, laugh about it a little.
Why don't we dive back a little bit into the challenges that you faced early on? In the beginning of the book, you really pulled on a lot of my heartstrings, you know, from just sharing your story and the adversity you overcame. So just talk a little bit more about those, and just so the readers so everybody here gets a little taste for why they should read this book and
Yep.
And you may shed a tear or two.
No, so just a little plug. If anyone wants the book, we're selling it at a Swerve exclusive price at the front. And so just to give you the rundown and the synopsis of the basis of the story is, what I wanted people to relate to was a young child getting his middle school to elementary school years, battling cancer as an immigrant in a new country, who no matter what he did just couldn't fit in. And it was throughout those years that he built the strength to overcome different adversity. And I kind of let it escalate in a natural progression, talking about getting a clean bill of health, going to high school, talking about some of the adversity I faced, finally being a healthy child, but at high school, which is a tough age to kind of start, talking about just wanting to be a part of a locker room at a younger age of my life, where so many years I was undergoing treatment, and no matter what I did, I just wasn't as fast as the other kids, and I couldn't keep up, so I was never really a part of that quote-unquote locker room, and I talk about navigating to it in high school. And then it jumps into my career, graduating college unemployed in the heart of the financial crisis, wanting to work in investment banking, and I talk about navigating the course of unemployment and how it was that mindset I developed as a child that helped me handle rejection after rejection after rejection. And then the story comes full circle, of course, when I finally get to a point after starting to build my community, uncover some of my potential athletically, and finally share the story and see that, it came full circle, and, the impact it had on strangers was the takeaway. And I don't want to take away too much of the ending, but essentially the story is all about one obstacle after the other, an escalation, and the ability to relate no matter what you're going through.
Any more questions? Yeah.
I have a friend that's a publisher, and I was asking her about the whole publishing process, and she described it like, if you're somebody famous, like Jimmy Fallon's trying to write a book, it's very different. It's like, here's this huge advance, and then they basically write the book, and the publisher might never make back their money. What's the process like when you're an unknown writer like yourself? Can you tell us a little more about that?
So that's a really good question, actually. So there are two ways to publish your book. You can go through a traditional publishing house, or you can self-publish. In this era now, self-publishing is becoming more and more popular because it's a lot cheaper. And you can really essentially just publish your book on Amazon. You can upload a Word document, some pictures for the covers and the back cover, and then all of a sudden your book is published, and Amazon will also print it for you. Most people now, unless again you're talking about celebrities, are probably going to go the self-publishing route. Now, what that means is, from a marketing perspective, the onus is on me to get the word out there, as opposed to a publisher, which is going to push it for their clients. The other thing that was taken into account as I was navigating this, and Eric's friend was walking me through this, a publisher is going to want to tweak your story to what's going to sell. And I'm not saying that they would have tweaked this too much, but I was at a point where it was all very raw to me, and I didn't want anyone tweaking it at all, unless it was my editor in that kind of, really intimate setting where, it was just me and him, and there was no business aspect to it. Because at the end of the day, yes, his name was on it, but it's not like a publisher. He didn't ultimately care about the final product as much as a publisher would for sales. So that was another aspect to it.
So you self-published?
I self-published on Amazon, yeah. And I got an editor that knew how to navigate the self-publishing process, which is, I know I made it sound easy, it's not that easy to upload files to Amazon. So it's good to know someone that's done it for help.
So I work in traditional publishing, and within traditional publishing, so you're right, self-publishing is a lot more accessible. You get the full profit of it. Within traditional publishing, about 80% of books are not profitable, and 20% make the balance. Probably a very smart move on your part. Particularly, publishing is a notoriously slow business. It's amazing to me to hear that you published a book that quickly. I was in sales meetings today talking about books. Manuscripts are totally done, that some of them we're not publishing or selling until February. So it's just, if you have
I've
a story
heard
to
that
tell
as well.
quickly, that's a really good way to do it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I've heard that as well, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And I still, you know, when you said you work in traditional publishing, I was scared for a second.
No, no, no.
Because I didn't know where that was going. Thank you.
My company also has we have a self-publishing program as well.
Cool.
That's a big Amazon competitor in that space, so very supportive of self-publishing.
Yeah.
Did you have a goal outside of just publishing the book and like getting it out there? Did you have any goals set for yourself about the next step after that?
I really didn't, because up until the day that it went live, I didn't even know if anyone was going to buy it. So I really didn't. I knew that I wasn't afraid to kind of take stabs at it and kind of invest in myself and do some of the outreach, but I did not have a hard goal in terms of book sales or in terms of distribution or even, you know, in terms of marketing it. But one of the things that I learned along the way, for anyone thinking about writing a book, is a book is not necessarily a cash cow. You don't make money off selling. Yes, you do get proceeds from book sales. The way you make money as an author is essentially through speaking. And so what you want to do is you build the book to give you credibility so that you have the opportunities to speak in front of larger audience, do keynotes in front of companies, and engage with brands and other partners. And so people kept saying it to me, like along the way, but I was so busy writing the book that I didn't care about that at that point. But now that the book is out there, I'm starting to understand from a business aspect. You know, you want to use the book as your credibility and as your foundation piece for just building off that speaking platform.
Was there, once you were done with the book and with everything, was there like a period of like, you know, like people get like marathon blues, like after you run the race, like what now, and like, where's
Yeah.
the high, and like,
Yeah, after the book release, there was a pretty dark period because you spend 9 months. Like I spent 9 months of like blood, sweat, energy, ramping up, telling all my friends, and being excited about something. And then the night of the book release came, and the book release went really well and it was successful. But the next day, I went to work, opened up my laptop like a chump, and didn't know what to do with myself because I'm like, oh, well, I guess it's over now. Like, you know? So yeah, there was definitely a dark period, if you will, after, because you didn't know what to do with yourself. And if, you know, I was investing everything I had into writing it, and it was not too long after that where I reached out to Ali and Sarah and I said, okay, like I'm ready to really put more effort into this now and try to make something of it. Yep.
Yeah, so it seems like you put the book out, you're doing marketing now, and you know you kind of jumped into it with no knowledge of how to do it. Is there another challenge you have your mindset on after it, and just knowing that you want to jump into it, try it out?
You know, I've done a bunch of speaking over the last couple of years, but one of the things I really do want to, you know, figure out a way to master is I do want to get, you know, main stage opportunities for bigger companies and give keynotes and take this from a business aspect and talk to people across the spectrum. One of the things that really kind of hit home for me when I was writing this book was there's no reason why no one in this room can't write a book. There's no reason why anyone in this room can't succeed at something they want to succeed at. And a lot of times when you look at corporations, a lot of people need to hear that. There's a lot of people out there in the audience that think there might be a separation from, you know, I'm going to just use banking because I was in banking for a while, from your analyst to your C-suite. And what I want to do is I want to show them how this book can help you bridge that gap. And this book can, you know, touch the C-suite the same way that I could touch the analyst. And so my goal, and one of the things that we're working on now, is kind of figuring out a way to get on that main stage.
Awesome. So to wrap things up, I want to just quickly say that, you know, the reason why we kicked off these speaker series rides, and this is maybe our 10th or 12th, but we've met just so many amazing people. We've been open for 6 years and have 3 studios and have thousands of people have come through our doors. And it is really our goal here to connect each other and to show New York City that it's not about me, it's about we. And it's all of us collectively lifting each other up and helping one another And so I think Bishoy's story, I know he mentioned Swerve a lot, and again, I swear I didn't pay him. But that's really what we're trying to do here. And I think, so what I want to say is, now you have somebody who, for those out there who want to write a book, now you know somebody who writes a book. Reach out to him, because guess what? He's going to respond, especially if you say, hey, I was at your talk. So reach out to him. You're also with a group right now of people who all were clearly interested in this topic. So I think this could be a really great segue into just introducing yourself to your neighbor, and we're gonna close it off. Bishoy, actually, if you have any final remarks you want to say, a way that you can help Bishoy, you can buy his book, or if your company has budget for hosting speakers like this and would be inspired by it, ask your boss, right? Why not? Let's help each other out, and yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Just want to say thank you. And any pictures you guys post with the book would be great tonight. But
That's it.